Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, I am so glad you're joining me today because we're looking at something truly fascinating and, well, honestly, kind of startling. When you think of our great Western national parks, you're probably picturing, majestic mountains, breathtaking geysers, the whole shebang, family road trips and summer vacations. But a brand new study just published by the U.S. Geological Survey and its partner agencies has just dropped a total bombshell about what's lurking in some of those beautiful waters. We're talking about microscopic organisms that are literally making headlines across the country. We're going to break down exactly what the data says, completely skipping the sensationalism.
So that brings us right to the big question currently dominating the news cycle. What invisible threat is lurking in the warm waters of our national parks? See, the U.S. Geological Survey recently went out into the field. They tested the waters in some of the absolute most famous, beloved parks in the country, places like Yellowstone, Grand Teton, and Lake Mead. And what they found hidden in those warm, inviting waters? I mean, it sounds like science fiction, but it's very real. They discovered the presence of a notoriously fatal organism.
Section 1, Invisible Threat in Parks. Let's actually dive right into the fieldwork to see exactly where this pathogen is spreading. Now, the researchers didn't just test one or two random puddles. They collected 185 water samples across 40 different thermally influenced recreation sites out west. We're talking hot springs, geothermal systems, shallow warm water areas, and get this, they detected the amoeba in about 1/3 of all the samples collected. 1/3. That sounds incredibly high, right? But here's the absolute crucial point, so don't panic just yet. Many of the sites that actually tested positive were remote geothermal areas or low-use thermal waters. They were not your heavily trafficked popular swimming beaches. So while the amoeba is for sure out there, it's primarily thriving in places where massive crowds of people aren't typically swimming every single day. Section 2, Defining the Brain-Eating Amoeba. Let's unpack the science. What exactly is this thing? Meet Naegleria fowleri. That's the scientific name for what the media usually calls the brain-eating amoeba. It's a microscopic organism that can cause a super severe infection known as PAM, or primary amoebic meningoencephalitis. Try saying that 3 times fast. Anyway, the mechanics of how this infection actually happens are really specific, and honestly, understanding this is key to protecting yourself. You don't get this infection from, say, accidentally swallowing a mouthful of lake water. The infection physically occurs only when contaminated, warm, fresh water enters directly up your nose. This usually happens when folks are swimming, diving, or just splashing around doing active water sports. The water gets forced up the nasal cavity, giving the amoeba a direct, fast-track pathway to the brain. Section 3, The Risk in Numbers. Let's look at the statistical reality here to separate the facts from the fear. We really have to start with this number because it validates exactly why public health officials take this so seriously. 98%. That is the fatality rate of the disease caused by this amoeba. Basically, once an infection actually takes hold, it is almost always fatal. It's a staggering, really terrifying statistic that highlights the absolute severity of the threat when exposure leads to an infection. But wait, what's truly interesting is how we frame that 98% fatality rate against the actual frequency of the disease. Take a look at this breakdown. According to the CDC, from 1962 all the way to 2024, so we're talking a period of over 60 years here, there have only been 167 reported cases of PAM in the entire United States. Of those 167 cases, tragically, there were 163 fatalities and only 4 survivors. So yeah, while the outcome of an infection is undeniably grim, the event itself is phenomenally rare. Over 6 decades, out of the literally hundreds of millions of people swimming in American waters, there were only 167 cases. This historical context is just absolutely vital to keep our anxiety in check, while still remaining vigilant. Section 4. Why are they spreading? If the disease is so rare, why on earth is it dominating the news right now? Well, the urgency of this recent study was heavily catalyzed by a tragic event that happened just recently. Back in 2022, a child actually passed away after being exposed to the amoeba at the Lake Mead Reservoir near Las Vegas. This devastating incident brought intense public and scientific scrutiny to thermally influenced recreational waters out west. It really prompted officials to put out heavy warnings for visitors, and researchers realized they needed to start taking a much, much closer look at where exactly this amoeba is living. And during that closer look, researchers found a very specific environmental trigger, 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Naegleria fowleri absolutely thrives in warm freshwater environments. 86 degrees is the exact temperature at which this amoeba really starts to wake up and become active. And what's vital to understand here is that it can multiply rapidly during periods of extreme heat. When summer temperatures spike and the water gets unusually warm, this amoeba essentially hits a biological accelerator. Which leads us directly to the big macro issue at play here. Let's look at this crucial quote right from the study's authors. They state, cases of PAM in the United States have seen a northerly geographical expansion since 1962, and the trend is predicted to continue as global temperatures increase. This brilliantly illustrates the intersection of public health and our changing climate. As global temperatures creep up, water bodies further north are hitting that 86-degree thresholds way more frequently and for longer stretches of time. The natural habitat for this amoeba is physically expanding, creeping further north into parks and recreation areas where, honestly, it previously just couldn't survive. So, what does this all mean for us? How do you empower yourself with this knowledge? The study's authors really underscore the need for public awareness, and officials have some very clear, actionable safety advice for anyone visiting these parks. First and foremost, and this is the big one, avoid getting warm, fresh water up your nose. I know, it sounds almost too simple, but it's literally the most effective preventative measure. Second, use extra caution during periods of extreme heat when the water is unusually warm. And finally, just be especially careful when you're diving, jumping, or doing water sports in these environments, because those are the exact activities that force water up the nasal cavity. Basically, if you're going to enjoy warm springs or shallow lakes in the dead of summer, keeping your head above water is your best defense. Okay, so we've covered the science, we've looked at the incredibly rare but serious statistics, and we've gone over the actionable safety advice to protect yourselves. But this USGS study leaves us with a lingering environmental reality that goes way beyond a single summer vacation. The ecosystem is shifting, the waters are warming, so I want to leave you with this final thought. As global temperatures continue to rise, pushing these warm water habitats further and further north, where will this invisible amoeba show up next? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, stay safe out there.